call the meeting to order at 6:32. Nice to see everyone. Thanks for being here. Let's see, we'll start maybe with the previous minutes and reports, separate that out from policies. Any discussion, questions, concerns about the minutes? Okay, so hearing none, if someone can make a motion to approve.
I'll move.
Minutes. Great, Polly, thank you. Well, I'll do roll call. Polly,
Aye.
Jean Marie,
Aye.
Emily,
Aye.
Kevin,
Aye.
Rick,
Aye.
and Mary is an aye. Okay, so moving on to policies, we have a second reading and the first reading of a number of them. Any discussion, questions, concerns about policies? I'd had one quick one that I'm assuming, Lynn, that in this first reading of the use of school facilities policy, that H3, that a lot of that is suspended during COVID.
Yeah, that was the normal review of that policy.
Okay.
We are not opening our facilities for anyone during the state of emergency.
Okay. Yeah, I figured that. I just wanted to double check.
That one does represent, though, a merging of a lot of separate facilities use forms.
Yeah.
Previously.
Yeah, it's good. It seems like a pretty kind of nicely dialed and kind of condensed. Any other discussion on policies? Okay, so anyone like to make a motion to accept the both that second reading of the interdistrict policy and the first reading of all the ones listed?
I'll make the motion to approve.
Thanks, Kevin. So roll call, Polly,
Aye.
Jean Marie,
Aye.
Kevin,
Aye.
Rick,
Aye.
Emily,
Aye.
and Mary is an aye. Great. So I don't think we need to shift anything around tonight. Lynn, do you feel the need to shift anything around in the order of the schedule for the night?
All set.
Okay. And Morgan, you said we have one visitor?
Correct, Casey Blaney.
Okay. And
I don't know if you can see her on your phone because her video's off.
I cannot. And Casey, are you interested in speaking to the board, or are you just joining to observe?
I'm just joining to hear your discussion and your direction on the central office space.
Okay, perfect. Which I believe we're going to cover at the very end of the meeting. So you'll have to hang tight with us for the long haul here.
That's fine. I've been through plenty. Thank you.
Okay, super. So in our central office spotlight, Dominic, you are up.
Okay. Well, I'll start off with an update on devices. Okay, making sure I had actually unmuted myself. So I think, although we still actually have devices that we've ordered as far back as July that we're still waiting on, I think we're to the point now where, because a couple schools have a few extra devices that we're able to let other schools borrow now. So I think we're to the point where we can cover all students K to 12. So, and it's still kind of crazy that we've got Enosburg that has their devices they ordered in early July that they still haven't seen.
So
Wow.
Dominic, when you say we all have devices, do you mean laptops or Chromebooks, or do you mean just devices in general?
I think they're all Chromebooks.
Okay. So if a kid still has an iPad, they should bring that in and change it, or no?
Oh, well, there might be a few pockets here and there, especially I think special ed assigned some iPads. I'm not sure what else. There might have been a few others that I wasn't aware of, I guess.
Yeah, I just say that because my daughter has one. They didn't
Okay.
have a Chromebook at the time, so they gave her an iPad. But
Oh,
and
okay.
we were waiting for the order to come in, but yeah, I'll just have her touch base with someone.
Okay, yeah. It might be a case of where the device is coming,
Right.
or it's one of those that are going to be borrowed from another school and they just aren't quite ready yet. But it is very recent. And actually, I think just today we were talking back and forth with a couple of people about who has extra devices that can be borrowed by other schools. So they're not quite all out there yet, but we at least should have them somewhere. Okay, another item I wanted to make everyone aware of. I don't know if you're all familiar with the E911 requirements that came out a while back. We still had several schools, I technically still have a few that aren't E911 compatible yet, but we had, let me make sure I don't miss any, check my notes. So over the summer, we had new phone systems installed in Berkshire, Montgomery, Richford Elementary, Richford Junior Senior High School, and Sheldon. And those systems will allow, after that point, all of our schools will be able to be E911 eligible or E911 compliant. And the reason we did so many at once is because we found out that this would be the last year that the state was offering matching grants to help people become compliant. And it's something Morgan and I talked about and thought, even though it's maybe not the best summer to be spending extra money, it was a 50% matching grant. So, the projects ranged anywhere from a little over 12,000 to a little over 21,000, depending on the school. So if we were able to get 50% of that back, we didn't want to miss out on that opportunity. Mm-hmm. So we should shortly have all of our schools be E911 compliant. And once
like my IT manager at the office just decided you didn't have enough on your plate this summer, you'd throw that in there too, Dominic?
Yeah, why not, right? It's hard to say no when it would mean losing all that money. But so all those schools will just have to finish our testing. There's a little bit of work still being done by Consolidated Communications to make the phone service match with the new systems. But once that's done, we just have to do testing, and then we'll be compliant, and then that's when we can get the refunds for 50% of what they spent on the upgrades. So hopefully that will be coming soon.
Is Cold Hollow E911 compliant?
I believe so.
Okay.
Enosburg went through that whole, they got the same matching grants and they got all new phone systems just the previous summer. And I'm almost 100% sure Cold Hollow was included in that. Okay, so the next topic, wanted to touch base on E-rate. Just to kind of give an update with how things went this year. Trying to think make sure we don't have anyone new. Is everyone familiar with E-rate? Okay.
I am not familiar with E-rate.
Okay, great. So E-rate, it's a federal program aimed to help schools pay for internet, basically internet access, and it can be used both towards the internet service or any equipment that you use, any hardware to make your internet connection work. And the refund amounts are based on free and reduced lunch rates. So we generally come in pretty high. And now I'll share a spreadsheet here. Okay, everyone seen that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So this E-rate, they separate it into two categories. Category one is our internet service. So it's something we would all be paying for anyway. But you can see in this discount rate, these are where we fall. This is where we fell this past year as far as what percentage of what we spend on our internet service are we able to get refunded to us from this program. And with this being the first time that we've been through the E-rate with our new districts, we basically had to start over as if we were, doing E-rate for the first time. And I had to get some help from Morgan and Dawn, and jump through a bunch of hoops over the summer to kind of prove that we are actual schools and prove what our free and reduced lunch rates are. But the good part of jumping through those hoops is we was able to add in a few things that we haven't had added in the past years. One was central office. We have not received E-rate funding from central office in, I want to say 5 or 6 years. And Cold Hollow, we've never been approved for E-rate funding for Cold Hollow. So just thought as we're going through the whole process of, starting from scratch anyway, we might as well give it a try and try to get those added both added back in again. And then everything was fully approved. So this is where, this is what everybody's spending on internet this year. These are what we'll get back. So across the SU, almost $40,000 that we'll be able to recoup.
Nice. That's great, Dominic. Dominic, how come the Berkshire internet expenses are so high compared to the other schools? Who's the Berkshire provider, and why is that so much higher than the others?
Yeah, that's because of their location. Everybody else uses Comcast and has cable internet. There is no Comcast availability where Berkshire School is. So they're getting fiber internet through Consolidated Communications.
Oh, our favorite
Yep.
internet company up here in Franklin County.
So it is pricey, but it's really the only way to get them something better than DSL there.
Wow. Okay.
So and that's where this is really nice, that at least they can get 70% of that back.
Yeah, absolutely.
And for all of NMV, we're kind of right on the edge of the 70-80% split. So it's possible next year we could be back to 80% again. That is where we have been in the past. We're just low enough on this time around to drop it down to 70%. So that's category one, and category two is the equipment. Not as much in here, but it's still a pretty good chunk. Basically, I work with, right around December, January every year, I'll talk to the local IT staff in each building and kind of come up with a plan for what, access points or switches, or if the firewalls need to be replaced, whatever, what they might need the next year. And we'll put that into here. And I highlighted eligible expense just to remind me to mention that. Not in some of these cases, we've actually spent more than what it shows here. It's a little bit confusing, but some items are only partially eligible. So there might be something where it's a 60% eligible item. So we may have actually spent more, but only 60% of the cost is eligible, and then we get the 70% back of that 60%, if that makes sense. And another instance where things are actually off from where they appear was like Rickford Junior Senior High School. This Sonic wall, that was for their firewall renewal. We did a 3-year renewal, so they actually will be spending a little over $2,400. But because it's 3-year, you can only ask for the current year's refund back. So this year we had to spend the whole 24, but the next 2 years we won't have to spend anything on it, and we should still get that 652 back each of the next 2 years as well. So it's not, you know, a ridiculously huge amount, but I think between the two categories, we're right around 50,000 for the year. So it certainly helps. The category 2, the equipment, we can get that reimbursement right after we spend the money, pretty much, or just a few forms, and then we can request the reimbursement. For the internet service, you have to wait until after June 30th, because the end of the fiscal year, since you're receiving the service for the full year. So the category 1 money, we don't get back until after July 1. Okay. All right, so there's just one more thing I wanted to show. So I've been working on something called, there's a system called Clever, and we've started using that to help kind of pair our system with other systems that we use. So we don't have to go in, you know, enter all of our students and all of our classes and whatever in all these different systems that we use. It syncs with PowerSchool, and then it can sync our data to whatever other apps that we want to use with it. And so that was the first step, was using it for rostering. We've been doing that for a little while. And then I started working on using it for single sign-on, because I know that's, you know, one of the annoyances that a lot of people have is just the number of different usernames and passwords that everyone has. And we're able to use Clever to sync with both with PowerSchool and our Google Suite. So now the apps that we sync with Clever, people are able to sign in with their Google accounts. Okay. And then I got a request recently, you know, with concerns from teachers with younger students, particularly kindergartners, you know, and thinking if we go to fully remote and we're sending devices home with these kids, and, you know, some of them don't even know all their letters yet, and they're expected to be able to type their name and their whole full email address and password to sign into their computer. And I found this product that Clever offers called Clever Badges. And it's kind of the next step beyond single sign-on, where it can do the Google single sign-on for them. And I'll actually just show you a short video demo, just to kind of show. But basically, they'll be able to use badges and use the camera on their Chromebooks or iPads or whatever device they might be using in order to sign into the devices.
The students at this age, they are fun to be around. You can introduce any type of subject, topic, and they're just really eager to learn. I usually log them in with their username and password. This is very hard for them because they don't know their letters and they don't know their numbers. How do I expect for them to log in? And typing in their username and password can take between a minute to 5 minutes, just depending on the student. It pretty much all laid back on me for me to log them in. At first, when we met the Clever team and they came and they introduced this new concept, we're crossing our fingers because it's definitely going to change our life and our kids' lives to log into their computers. Clever Badges, the tool that TKs are using in the classroom, they get to wear it and then they get to stick it in the back, and then they scan their barcode and are easily logging into their online learning programs. I feel like this is going to be a time saver for me because I will definitely get to use those extra minutes that I have for intervention programs that I run. Even to help the students go on online learning programs. If they have any questions, I feel like I can easily help them more. When they logged in using their username and password, they weren't really excited about it. Now I feel like I've seen right away. They're so eager and excited to even log in to use their online learning programs. I really want them to enjoy school and think of it as a positive. We want our students to strive and be the best that they can.
Okay, so that's my current project that I'm hoping to have finished up here. Hopefully by the end of the week is what my goal is. And be able to start rolling that out to any schools that want to use it. And I think that's all I've got, unless anybody has any questions.
Just want to say that the work that Dominic's been doing around the data management has been a heavy lift in and of itself. And given where we are with the response to the pandemic, there have been a lot of additional pieces that he's also had to attend to that he wouldn't in a typical year, like trying to look creatively for a solution to young kids not maybe having enough support to be able to log in, whether it's in school or at home. So he's definitely done a lot of really much appreciated legwork to try to make this work the best that it can for students. So thank you, Dominic.
Thanks.
And I just want to say, Dominic's all like, well, I only found $50,000, but like if somebody handed me $50,000 or I walked by it on the sidewalk, I'd certainly pick it up. So don't shortchange yourself there going through the effort to get that money back. It's needed. We can use it in a million different ways, I'm for sure.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dominic. Truly, it is a heavy lift for everyone right now. So Heather, you're up now.
Okay, great. Hello, everyone. I am going to share my screen. Hopefully this works well for me. Okay, can everybody see my screen? Okay, great. So I'm going to start off with a little video that the LEAPS students made for Lights On After School back at the beginning of the school year. Most of you might recall every fall there is a nationwide celebration of after school programs. They call it Lights On After School as a way of highlighting programming and showing that the lights don't turn off at schools at 3 p.m. There's a lot of active engagement and learning and fun happening in our schools. Normally, we would have had a lot of in-person presentations or celebrations of some sort, but we decided this year with all the restrictions to do a little video. And this is what we came up with. Great. Oh, there we go. Okay. One of the things I really love about this video is each site was given the task of, they were assigned a letter. There's 8 letters in Lights On. We have 8 sites, and the students themselves came up with how they were going to present their letter as a group. So it shows the youth engagement, the youth leadership, and well, there was so much fun in that video. It was great to hear the stories about how the groups of students came together to come up with the stories or their clips. So when I was thinking about what to say for tonight, often, oops, oh no. Often when I'm in a lot of workshops, you know, we start with icebreakers and we do roses and thorns. And so I thought I would just kind of highlight some roses and thorns. Roses. We have a lot of roses. Programs are going pretty well still. Our program sizes are relatively balanced. We have few students on wait lists. So that's really positive. Hub days have been great in a lot of ways because of the possibility for in-depth programming. Some students have been making movies because they're in programming for 7 hours and they have all this time, so they can really like get into movie making, prolonged crafts, nature hikes, and other activities. Bingo's been super popular. We've been doing the take-home kits and they've been really, really popular. The amount of take-home kits we've been doing started relatively small, and it's kind of increasing as kids are learning how much fun they are. One of the focuses we're doing soon is going to be take-home present style activity kits, so that our students have something that they can make and give to somebody else if they choose to for a present. We've been expanding our online programming. Started off really small, but we've have cooking classes going in a couple of the programs after school. The style with that is, in some cases, they cook and by the time they're done, they can have dinner and with their family. And often the family's part of the cooking classes as well. So you see younger siblings and you see parents and other caregivers in this too. So we have this wonderful amount of family engagement there. We also have Linking Engineering to Life, which I explained in the board packet a little bit. That program is an engineering program geared towards shrinking the opportunity gap for female and non-binary students. It's open to youth in grades 5 through 8. And we have students in 4 different schools participating together in that program. And that's a grant funded program. So we were able to get all the kits. The students were given a box of kits for the entire program to take home to do virtually. We also have GSA that is online, dance clubs, and we're doing movie clubs online too. We also have been having an amazing amount of cross-school collaboration where the 2 middle high schools are talking with each other and they're sharing programming. Like the elementary and middle level programs are doing similar. We're like pooling our program ideas together in a way that is accessible to the other site coordinators, so that planning is a little bit easier for all of the sites going forward. And like I said earlier, youth are really engaged in the programs and they're having a great time, despite like, you know, it does look different. We're not engaging, you know, inside in the same ways that we normally would, but our programs are outside a lot, focused on social, emotional work with the students and the relationship building, like I've talked about before. Students are kind of helping to organize like what kind of activities they want to do. So we're having really great programs. We have a couple of thorns, not too many really. Staffing remains a challenge. Q2 has been a little bit harder to staff, which started on Monday. A couple of sites have 1 day a week where they're not able to offer programming for staffing reasons. It's a lot of the same reasons we just hear across the state for staff. And our programs are a little smaller than usual too. We would love to see more students in the school, of course, but like I said in the first slide, at least we don't really have much of a wait list. It's kind of not every student that normally would have been in our program wants to be in the program, partially because of the prolonged time of mask wearing. So some families are just choosing to take their children home, but then we have the online programming for them or the take-home kits for those students as well. And then the funding for the Richford Junior Senior High School program runs out soon at the end of this school year. I was hoping to write a 21C grant to expand the program, but they're not offering a competition this year. As it says on the slide, I'm working to find other ways of supporting that program. It's been successful. We have some thoughts of maybe some shifts and some directions to take that program to expand it in ways that will meet the needs of more students within that the Richford community. There's some excited about the possibilities that the partners are thinking through, and we've got some steps to take to move forward to secure funding for that site. Looking ahead, we're working on Rise Vermont grants for outdoor activities so that we can continue our really awesome and fun, engaging outside activities, outside programming. So hopefully we will be successful with those grants. Still working on getting increasing our online programming, that American Sign Language, STEM programming with Mr. K, and art programs. Thinking we can do caregiver and youth American Sign Language together. Mr. K is working on like a virtual field trip program with GoPros and stuff, so that we can at least virtually bring students other places. Contingency planning, like to try to be ahead as much as I can, and we're hoping to be able to offer some sort of in-person enrichment program similar to the hubs that we have going on now, if the schools were to operate in step 1 again. So just kind of planning for the worst, hoping for the best there. And with statewide collaboration, we're working with the partners across the state, that's Vermont After School and other after-school programs, learn what works well for them, share our stories, get some new ideas. And Vermont After School, through a partnership with AOE, has the ability to tailor some free professional development for after-school program staff. So I'm going to be working on surveying our staff to see what their needs are, and you know, how best to support them to continue our high-quality programming. And we had a very successful amount of, like, we hit our minimum number for the survey participation for the Vermont Youth Project. We should have the results back in mid-January, and at that, hopefully I'll be able to have some very direct and clear data to share with the board when I present in January. And I went through that really quickly. I'm going to stop sharing. If there's any questions.
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
It was great. Lots of good stuff going on with after school.
Thanks so much, Heather.
Thank you.
Okay, so next, Gabrielle, you're up to talk about the Virtual Academy.
Hey, everyone. So I'm also going to share my screen. And I'm going to time myself so I make sure I don't take too much time. So since this is the first time we've really talked about the Virtual Academy, I just thought I would sort of overview what's going on and where we started and where we're headed. So I want to start saying this group of teachers, the K-8 teachers that we're working with, came in like a week before school started pretty much, and had to design an entire school in that period of time. And they just really, not all of them wanted to be there. A lot of them had already like started in service at their home schools and were pretty excited to be where they were. And so they came in and were just really flexible and really helpful with one another, and put all their personal desires aside and just sort of went for it. And I really focused on both for the faculty and for as in the design, focused on relationships and connectedness. That seemed to be something that we really needed to focus on in the spring that was hard because of the way that things happen. And so I really kept bringing them back to, you know, whatever you do, it should be about relationships. The schedule, it should be about relationships. And they've done an awesome job. So this is Emma Holcomb. She is our 3rd grade teacher. And this is it's a lunch bunch that she does. This one happened to be sort of Halloween themed. And the kids were having a blast sharing their costumes and chatting. And Emma's cat is a mascot for this classroom. And Onyx had her own little outfit on as well. So I'm just going to show you around the classrooms and how it's set up, and then I'm going to give you some time to answer questions. So all these teachers, the K-4 teachers, decided, they worked as a team and they decided to create emoji classrooms. And I think that came out of, you know, somebody took a class and they had a resource. And so they developed all these classrooms. And they really focused on trying to be simple, have it be easy for kids and also easy for parents to access. So they all kind of look the same, but they have different teachers and they have different components. And I'm going to take you into Amber Farnham's classroom. Amber came to us from Enosburg Middle School as a 6th grade teacher, and now she's our 2nd grade teacher. So she had a huge learning curve in a week to figure out how to teach 2nd graders instead of 6th graders. And she's done an awesome job. Her morning meetings are hilarious, to say the very least. She's very entertaining. So this is her classroom, and each day kids come to the classroom and they can go to the day of the week that it is. They can listen to her instructions by clicking on the little audio button here, and she runs them through the daily schedule. They have a check-in form that they fill out that's very 2nd grade friendly, and she has them do a checkout also at the end of the day, and all K4 teachers are doing something similar. She has a morning meeting at 8:30 every morning. Like I said, it's hilarious to watch 2nd graders telling jokes and just laughing together, and Amber and all the K4 teachers are doing an amazing job at developing that connection every morning, but also integrating some little learning pieces in there as well. All of these links go to somewhere. So their K4 team is using Seesaw to get work back and forth. And they also are using subscriptions like Mystery Science to really engage learners. And then she's got all these little reminders over here. Anne Morey is providing intervention services. So some of the reading groups over here are for intervention. And that is Amber's classroom. They all look very similar, but have sort of different little pieces based on the grade level and what students need. And then the 5-8 classrooms are using Google Classroom. And this is a 5th grader might see, except for it is from a teacher's perspective. So I think they would see something a little bit different. Like, I don't think they'd see that name. I have lots of classrooms. They only see these. And I just want to point out, I guess, a couple of things besides the academic classrooms. They have an advisory. So 5, 6, 7, 8 all have an advisor, one advisor that they meet with daily. And some have 2 meetings, one at the beginning of the day and the end of the day. And those meetings have been really, really important in terms of, sort of goes back to that relationship and connectedness. They're very well attended. We've got 80 to 100% of kids attending these advisory meetings. And then we also created a student lounge. So I worked with a group of students to create a student lounge where they can just socialize. It's just a social place for them to be. I run like lunches, so I'll open up a Google Meet on a lunch and they can just pop in and talk to each other and eat their lunch and do whatever they're doing, and just have conversation supervised. And they post lots of fun videos of things they're doing at home, and they have fun in there. These guys all, K through 12, K through 8, they love to tell jokes. I don't know what is up with the joke telling, but even the kindergartners tell jokes. So I don't know what's going on with that, but some of the things I've got in the works, I'm going to try to put together a virtual event. So I'm working on that for January. I'm going to try to work in a stand-up comedy because it seems like it's really, they really just enjoy the telling jokes, and talent show, and then some learning exhibitions. I've been working with faculty on how to collect that type of stuff. And then recently, when I was doing this board report for you all, I realized that we don't have any sort of logo. So I was looking at some of the other board reports and they all have logos. So I did a logo contest. I'm just going to show you some of the logos, and I think I might have you vote on which ones you think are the best. I do not think any of these actually are logos, except for maybe one, but I think I'll have you vote on your favorite theme, and I'm going to get the kids back together to sort of revise. So here's one, And this student did a really nice job. She put, this is sort of one of the themes, she put all the learning materials around, like the globe and the books, to represent the learning part of VLA. And then she has the computer to represent virtual, and then the community part, and she's got all the names of the schools. She also did a second one, and the leaf represents Vermont, which includes everybody. So instead of being like a single thing. So she did pretty clever there. And then Chloe did this nice one that I think has the same sort of theme as that first one, where she's, you know, identifying sort of the tools that we're using, and then also a sign of the times here in the middle. And then this one probably came close to being closest to being an actual logo. And this student, you know, used some of the state flag colors and did this clever thing where the VLA are all part of the triangle. So those are the ones we did get one from Amber Farnham's son, but he came in late, so he didn't get a chance to get his in there. So I'm just going to give you an opportunity to vote here. Can you guys, do I have to stop sharing for you to see the reactions? I didn't turn off my video. I don't know why it's off. Oh, I can't do it. Can you see reactions?
I shut your video off, Gab, because your Wi-Fi was lagging.
Gotcha.
I can see reactions.
All right. Reactions to number 1. Anybody vote for number 1?
Are you wanting us to do a thumbs up for the
yeah, do a thumbs up if you would go for number 1 as a theme. It's probably not going to be the exact logo, but okay, none for 1. All right. How about this theme of the leaf, the maple leaf, representing like everybody? Oh, you guys are going for theme number 3, huh? All right, I'm assuming I'm going to see a lot of thumbs up for theme number 3, which is the sort of computer and the tools and all those 3 things together. All right. I think I might get those 2 ladies together to figure that out. Are there any questions?
Gabrielle, just more of a comment. I'm wildly impressed. It looks like an inordinate amount of work to kind of create this from scratch with very little time and under, you know, a fair amount of duress in this kind of COVID era. So, and it's really so nice to actually be able to kind of comprehend how it's running, because I haven't really had a much insight into, you know, what does that look like, and how are the teachers kind of guiding the kids through their days. And I love that you have your hangout time. It seems really centered on kind of connectivity, and I think it's really so important right now. So like I said, I'm wildly impressed. Thank you so much for spearheading that really important effort.
I just add one piece in there, Mary. One thing that, you know, I know Gab is probably too humble to point out, but Gab was also going to be a teacher this year, and she found out about a week before the school year started that she was going to get a promotion into a principal role. So not only did those teachers get a surprise at the start of the year, Gab did as well. And she has really done a fantastic job of rising to that challenge of not only, it's a big enough challenge to jump into leadership, but to jump into leadership and work with a group of people to design an entire school from scratch with really no playbook, because who really has ever done that before? So there's just been a lot of really good stuff that has come out of this. And I think that there are some lessons that are being learned right now in VLA that we will want to capture and make sure that we don't lose some of those lessons as we move forward in the post-pandemic world. So thank you, Gab, for everything that you're doing.
I think I've shared with this group before that one of the things that we do on my team if things are going really well, we've instituted the air high five. And I think Gabby really needs a big old air high five. So good job, Gabby.
Definitely.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, great. So we're now just doing our kind of the other central office updates. I know everyone included in the packet updates. Let's see, Dominic, you're listed twice here, so I'm going to skip over you. Is Jody, do you have anything that you'd like to add to what was included in the board packet?
I do not.
And does anyone have any specific questions for Jody? Okay. Michelle, do you have anything that you'd like to add or share with the board?
I do not.
Any questions for Michelle from the board? Okay, and Heather, you've already gone.
Wait, hold on. I have a question.
Okay. Go for it.
I couldn't find the button fast enough. I just wanted to know, Michelle, sort of how things are going. I know that the students that you work with really do require like hands-on stuff. And I think this is like challenging for all of us. And this must feel uber challenging for those students that you work with. So I just wanted to, in a nutshell, sort of how do you think it's going?
Well,
I know.
It's challenging, definitely challenging. I think that my staff is extremely stressed and we are doing our best. Everybody has taken on the challenge, but I was going to move, I'll just give you an example. I was going to move with my staff on progress monitoring and talking about rate of improvement. And I went to one school to start, just a small group of people. Robin and I were there, and it led to people in tears. Like, I can't do one more thing. Please don't ask me to do this. And so I've kind of backed up and said, okay, like, what can we do instead to support what they're already doing? And so that's kind of where we're at. Less problems with masks, even with students with significant challenges than we had predicted. So that actually is going much smoother. Robin, as far as I was thinking about some challenging behaviors, how many issues have we had around that you get?
We've definitely had, we have probably about a half a dozen students that are really struggling across our supervisory union with appropriate mask wearing, which has led to some of our teams having to create behavior plans specific to mask wearing. And it's really because we're trying to implement the guidance that is coming out from the agency. And sometimes it seems silly that we're really pushing some of these issues when a child might have a mask, you know, below the nose and things like that. But it is guidance that's come out, and we feel like, you know, Lynn has done a really good job with communicating with staff and families around expectations. And we really can't let that slide with just one kid. And the guidance has gotten stricter with, you know, where we can have mask exemptions. So I will say that teams are being really creative, offering a lot of mask breaks for students, which I think is challenging for some staff to maybe want to honor, because a kid is taking, you know, a 2-minute break every 20 minutes. But some of the benefits to that, the kids are more engaged, even with those, you know, they might be missing 20 minutes out of the day for the mask breaks, but the benefit is they're being in class and earning those mask breaks for the most part. So the additional thing that Michelle hasn't added yet is, you know, Gab did a nice job with the overview of the Virtual Learning Academy.
I was just going there. Just going there.
Oh, you were? Okay, I'm not going to take away your thunder then. I'll let you do that.
I was just going to say that with the presentation, one part that we did not add is that we have 8 students who signed up for the Virtual Learning Academy who have such significant challenges that the Virtual Learning Academy wasn't meeting their needs. So we have even an alternative to that Virtual Learning Academy where it's some seesaw accounts with a behavior analyst that is supporting students with activities, and we have this program called VB Mapping, working with families, basically teaching families how to teach their students because they chose the remote only option. So lots of creativity going on for sure.
And just to clarify, a lot of the mask break, all of the mask breaks that are happening are being done outside to comply with the guidance. So
with that creativity around behavioral, we've had to make these COVID safety plans attached to their behavior plans. So like 2 separate plans. Lots of paperwork.
Thanks, Michelle. Jamie, do you have anything that you'd like to add to your report?
No, I have no other updates.
Okay, any questions from the board for Jamie? Okay, Dawn, do you have any thing you'd like to add to your board report?
I'm not sure if you guys can hear me or not. Mary, if you can just give me a thumbs up if you can, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely.
My wonderful internet's not working, so I'm out sitting in my car in my driveway.
Oh, goodness.
I just found out today that I ended up receiving the grant that I had written. It was a really large grant for a lot of different things. It ended up being $341,000 that RSU food service programs are receiving. I have taken and gone straight across the board with all of our schools to see different equipment needs that we need and how that can help us during these times of COVID and whatnot. So there's some really, really big ticket items on there that are going to start getting replaced, and it's a huge grant. It's going to be a huge help for our programs straight across the board for all of them. And so we're pretty excited about that. And just for one example, we have a exhaust hood in Richford Elementary School that we basically cannot use our stovetop for anything other than maybe just warming up something, but doesn't create any steam. So like boiling water, we couldn't even do on that stovetop. So that is one thing that is written underneath this grant. We're going to be getting that. Another thing is, unfortunately, Sheldon's warmer that they use to house their food in to keep it warm before it goes to their classrooms broke down yesterday. Heating element is 2 weeks out right now. So with knowing that we got this grant, I've secured a warming element and am probably taking my husband's truck tomorrow and heading to Kittredge Equipment in Burlington, Williston, to pick that piece of equipment up and bring it to Sheldon so that they can have warm meals for the rest of the time, because that part was 2 weeks out and Kittredge could not take and deliver that warming unit to us until December 4th. So just trucking along. I have ordered a TV dinner style tray machine that as any of you who've talked to me much know, I call it the zip machine. It's going to be like a heat sealing machine, and any meals that we are going to start bringing out as soon as I get this machine in are going to be like a TV dinner style meal. And it's going to be accompanied with probably a bag beside it, because then we can put our cold components into that. And then this TV style dinner machine can go into all of these warming ovens and stay nice and toasty warm for our kids, because that is one of the biggest complaints that we're seeing with the survey that you guys will see the results of here later on. So it's just a lot of different challenging things, but it is so nice feeding the kids in school that we just want all the kids to come back to school so we can feed them there, because it makes life much easier and we enjoy seeing their faces. It's one of the things that my staff are saying, that they really miss the interactions that they have with the kids when they come through the lunch lines and the breakfast lines.
I just wonder, Lynn, are there any members of your team that aren't like ultimate rock stars?
Not a one.
We're so blessed to have all of these guys on the team. Thank you so much, Dawn. I mean, I'll just take my husband's truck and go get it because they can't deliver it fast enough. Like, you know, yeah. I've sent accolades to Dawn for a long time now, and I can't stop. So, and now I understand when Dawn's pulling in a over $300,000 grant, why Dominic's like, well, I only found 50 grand. She's putting him to shame.
Thanks, Dawn. That's
like the challenge.
incredible. Okay. So Robin, did you have anything further that you wanted to add, or does anyone have any further questions for Robin?
The only thing that I would add is when I wrote that report, we were scheduled to have quite a series of trainings for our verbal and physical intervention. I was able to offer the training on November, I think it was 4th and 11th, but I did cancel the one that was scheduled to occur today. I felt even with the mitigation measures that we had in place with the guidance that was released last week, it was too risky given the close proximity that participants would have had to be in order to do the physical intervention. So I did cancel that, and we will reschedule when it's more appropriate for that to happen. So.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, Morgan, you are up with financial updates.
Great, thank you. I will try to go through this as quickly as possible. In your board packet, you have my report. There is no news still on the audit. We generally see those in December, so hopefully we'll have our hands on a draft in a few weeks. And I've certainly not heard anything from the auditors that gives me any worry. Your financial reports were in your packet. I would say that for this year, at least in terms of central office, the big unknown is that this CRF grant, which is the same pot of money that Dawn just talked about, and the same pot of money we've received some HVAC upgrades at the school level through. We still have not seen the grant documents come out of the AOE yet, and the money has to be spent by December 30th. So we are allowed to go back, but it's a little nerve-wracking not really having that in our hands yet. So hopefully by your December meeting, we will have received the grant, and hopefully we'll have applied for most of that money. But until that actually comes through, every time that we incur an expense here and incur an expense in your buildings and we say, oh, well, COVID is going to pay for it, we're still taking a bit of a leap of faith on that. I did include in your packet the financial management questionnaire. This is something that I bring to the SU board every year. It is required in statute that the superintendent gets somebody to fill this out and give it to you, and then the board has to take action to authorize the chair to sign it. The chair then signs it and it goes into a drawer, and nobody has ever asked for it. But I think the intention of it is to hold you, the board, hold your feet to the fire a little bit for at least not being able to say you had no idea that we had no internal financial controls, which we do. And those are laid out in that report. So I'm happy to answer any specific questions on that if folks have them. The report really doesn't change from year to year because we don't kind of rework our procedures every year from scratch.
So Morgan, you need a motion on that.
Yeah, it would be a motion to authorize the board chair to sign the financial management questionnaire.
Great.
I'll motion to give Mary authority to sign away from the table.
Okay. Jean Marie,
Aye.
Rick,
Aye.
Kevin,
Aye.
Emily,
Aye.
Polly,
Aye.
and Mary is an aye.
Okay, thank you, Mary. I'll track your signature down on that at some point.
Okay.
I'm going to just hop down before we hop into the budget development and talk briefly about the food service survey while Dawn is still out there in her car. I sent that out to you, I think, Monday by email. We conducted 3 separate surveys, one for students, one for staff, and one for kids. The files that I sent you included one page of sort of big picture takeaways where we could take the data and really combine it and show it graphically. So how many kids are eating, what are some of their impressions in terms of the welcomeness of the physical space and of the people who work there and what they think about the food. And then on the second page of those files, I gave you all the raw data because we did include in each of the surveys a few opportunities for people to give some long answers. So I put that in there. I've shared it with Dawn. Really, there are two purposes to it. The primary one is that Dawn is going to go over that in depth and use that data to tweak the food service programs where we're operating those programs. And then the reason that we push this out so quickly is because we are getting to the point where we need to make a decision about Sheldon and the food service program there for next year. Currently, the Abbey is managing that program, and by state law, we are not allowed to renew that contract for another year without bidding that out. So first, I think Dawn and I can take any general questions you have on the survey. Any themes on that you want to mention?
I'm really thankful that you included the comments. To me, that's one of the big indicators, where you really get to see what people have to say. I did have a really good time reading through the comments on the student survey. Gosh, there's some funny stuff in there. I'm just a picky eater. I don't like anything. So as much as you read those comments, it almost feels like for as many that say, I don't like it, or it's not healthy, you get as many, I do like it, and it's perfectly healthy. So it's hard to really, I thought by quickly reading those comments, it's hard to decipher, big changes to be made.
Right. Okay, so I won't need a motion for this, but if you want to have us bid out a food service management company for the year starting July 1, there's a lot of legwork that needs to go into that. It's a pretty restrictive RFP process. So there's a REMA documents that Dawn and I will have to go through and just tailor for our unique situation up here. And certainly we are willing to do that. I've started to ask people who have gone to bid recently what their experience was, and of the 2 places in Franklin County that have bid out, one place had only the Abbey bid, one place had the Abbey, and another outfit bid who actually came in pretty significantly lower and scored higher in the rubric that they had. So kind of mixed results out there, I guess, so far for these bids so far to date. If we were to bid it out, I think I would encourage you to keep the option to pull it in-house. And if you were to do that, what I would try to do is to work with Dawn and look at the bid documents that that private companies would be submitting to you. And the food service program of FNESU wouldn't necessarily make a bid, but we would try to give you a comparable in terms of the cost, and say this is what we think an equivalent amount would be if we were to run the program. It's not going to be obviously a firm bid that you get to hold on to, but it'll give you some sort of comparison between the two.
Morgan, we don't necessarily have to go to bid if we decide to pull it in-house under the FNESU food service umbrella, correct?
That is correct. You can choose to pull it in or to bid it out again. I believe if you bid it out again and you don't like the bids that you get, you can choose to pull it in at that point. What I am not sure, and I will need to find out, is that once you publish that rubric of we're going to give X number of points for the bidder that has the lowest cost, and we're going to give X number of points based on the menus that they provide. Once you go through that process, I don't know what kind of flexibility you have if bidder A gets a score of 90 and bidder B gets a score of 88, if you can go with that lower bidder, if you haven't already laid out the reasons in that rubric. So if you do decide to go bid, we'll get an answer to that by December, which is when we would need some kind of blessing on the document itself so that we could get it out.
Okay. So we should attend to a kind of where a final decision around this for the December meeting.
You will need to make a final decision of the December meeting if you, if the 6 of you are absolutely confident that you don't want to bid it out. I would want to know that now so that we don't spend the time doing the bid documents. But certainly if you're on the fence or if you're leaning towards bidding it out, we'll get that work done in the next 4 weeks.
Okay. So it seems as though this warrants some sort of discussion either under board business, or we could do it now in the middle of your kind of section. Do you have a preference, Morgan?
I don't. You probably want Dawn sticking around for that conversation, but either time is fine with me.
Okay. Well, Morgan, why don't
Mary,
we
either time is fine with me.
Okay. Well, Dawn, just so you know, you don't have to necessarily stay in your car, on your phone for the, through to the end. Why don't we just kind of segue to that conversation right now, Morgan, if that's okay, and then we'll circle back to finish financial conversations.
Sure thing.
Okay.
I have a question for Dawn. Well, I guess for Dawn. I just, as we were talking with Dominic about like adding one more thing to his plate, I wonder if we go down the road of pulling Sheldon into the FNESU food service, like, what is the capacity for our current food service staff to be able to handle that, or like just the sort of adding one more thing to Dawn's plate is my concern. So I don't know if that's a question. I guess that's a question for Dawn and for Morgan.
So the big part of adding another food service site into the piece is, yes, it's going to be 3 more employees, which is fine because as it is now, they're Abby employees, but we still are overseeing everything, and I'm in contact with the 2 Abby people very frequently anyways. It's going to be a little bit more paperwork as far as the claiming process, just because then I would be doing the claim and not the Abby. But all of that information comes across my desk anyways for me to look at and to certify that, yes, I agree with it and whatnot. As far as reviews and everything go, they're still a part of ours underneath our reviews. And so really, it doesn't really matter whether I'm pulling it for that place or for another school. It's still all a piece of what we have to do. And as far as like the menus and everything, I pretty much run the same menus at all of the schools is how we're doing this, because then we can certify the menus with the right components and guidelines that they need to be. So that would just get included in with that as well. So it's a little more work, but it's not a huge amount of extra work, because it's just another site where, I mean, I'm going through all the steps and processes for the other sites as well. So if I end up taking that one on, it's just another site. The biggest struggle is staffing piece of it. But I think that that's also a piece of, obviously, if this was to happen and the staff that work there currently were interested, then we could possibly see if they wanted to stay at that site and continue that employment. Just they would then become an SU employee rather than an Abbey Group employee.
So I think I spoke about this. I think it was at the NMV meeting. I don't know if I talked about kind of my position, and I think a lot of Sheldon residents' position. I think it's Dawn, you do a phenomenal job. I've heard great things about the meals, your staff, their smiling faces, all the hard work that you do. So there's no issue if it would be great to switch to you. I'm absolutely sure it would be. I think what gets a little tricky and dicey is the fact that the Abbey, the family that runs the business, are members of Sheldon community, and they do a lot for our community. They give back. They're out there fixing our baseball fields and donating money for kids' sports. And I'm not saying that that would stop if this contract went away, because regardless, they're still community members. But there's been a very long partnership between the Abbey and the Sheldon School. And I'm feeling kind of yucky about severing that, especially if we haven't gotten, I don't know if any of the feedback, not from what I saw, really highlighted that people are dissatisfied with the Abbey. I didn't see that. I think if that was the case, and this would be, a moot point, that wouldn't matter, because it's the health of our kids and what they're putting in their bodies is what matters. But it feels a little tricky for me. But I'm open to conversation, but I think that's kind of my perspective, that if there's a way that we can stay with the Abbey, I think that would make sense for our community. And I wish that I could get more feedback from the Sheldon community as a whole, because there wasn't a whole lot of response that I saw on Morgan's documents from Sheldon giving any feedback. And that would be really helpful. So if that's something we need to do, kind of tailor it down and do that within our own community, that would be really good to know. But I haven't heard anything of anybody being dissatisfied.
Yeah, I would agree, Emily. I didn't see anything that was like, oh, this is the best ever, or this is the worst ever, to indicate that we would definitely need to, keep them or not keep them. People, kids included, that are going to say they love it and that they hate it. So it sort of is what it is. And I would agree with you that I think the you know, the value of the relationship within the community may be, for me, the thing that sort of tips the if things are okay, then maybe it is worth continuing on with them, which may mean that it has to go out to bid, which I know would mean an amount of work for folks. But I think we value those relationships in our community for a whole lot of different reasons. And so if that's the thing that tips this over, then I would move forward with that.
I want to hop in on a couple of things. The bid versus no bid decision shouldn't be made based on adding more work to my plate or Don's plate, because that's what you pay us to do. If you want to bid it out, we'll do that work. Kind of echoing what Don was saying about the amount of work to run a site that is run by a food service management company versus running a site by our own people. I think, to be honest, the changes that Dawn has had to deal with in year one of her job of now we're remote, now we're feeding every kid in every community under 18, we're driving food to them. This decision and this transition either way is going to be something she can do in her sleep. And then I think, Jean Marie, you were kind of touching on this. You don't have the option to give this to the Abbey. You have the option to bid it out, and we can expect that because they're right next door that they're going to be likely the most competitive bidder, but they still do have to go through that process.
Yeah, because that's what I was thinking. Even if we bid it out, it doesn't necessarily mean the Abbey would get the bid, because that would negate the idea of bidding, I guess. There were a couple, I did see some negative comments around fresh food, that they were a lot of, so, but equally there were also positive comments, so.
Morgan, clarification question. If we go to bid and then do we also automatically need to show then what it would cost comparatively to bring it in-house to FNESU? So that is kind of part of the bidding process as well, because if FNESU can meet the food service needs of the Sheldon school in a more financially kind of prudent way, that kind of needs to kind of be taken into account with where those other, where the Abbey's bid lands, or if someone else tries to bid on it.
So my understanding, and I would certainly confirm this before we send the documents out, is that we would not be submitting a bid as an in-house option. You as the board are requesting bids from other companies, and you have the opportunity to reject all of them if you choose to do that. So you could look at the numbers and, let's say that the Abbey is the low bidder, but they're $1 more per lunch than what we think we can do it here. You would still have the option of saying, well, even though they're $1 more, we're going to go with them because of, the community issues that Emily has brought up. And on the flip side, you could do the same thing if it was, another company had the best bid package. You could choose not to take them and bring it in-house, even if in-house was going to be more expensive.
Okay, so it's a little bit of a different bid process than the one we went through for the construction, where you are committed to take that lowest bids.
Exactly, because with that one, you didn't have the option of telling your teachers that they're going to go out and build the building for you.
Right.
Kind of what we're doing with this.
Yeah, of course. Okay. I mean, I certainly want to honor the historical relationship that, that Emily is speaking to, and I appreciate that value in the community. And I mean, it seems as though where we're landing with this is let's do the bid, and then we still have agency to decide in the end if that maybe it will not work and maybe it makes more sense. I mean, this is this kind of tricky needle to thread as we try to kind of navigate how each town has operated historically and how we now operate as a collective. I do think there's some issues of kind of equity when we have one school as an outlier not participating in our supervisory union kind of food program. And I also really honor that relationship that's longstanding and the kind of connection to the Abbey. So it seems like it doesn't hurt at all. I know it's extra work when everyone's already pretty stretched thin. So I'm cognizant of that, but it seems the sense I'm getting from the board is that we could bid it out and then we will take it from there.
I
Sounds
agree.
good. My hope is then to have that bid document ready for your December meeting. It might mean that I am sharing a draft in advance with you for some feedback, but that is also, given the timeline, probably pretty optimistic. So you may be getting it the morning of your meeting as well, but I will bring that back in December.
Quick question, Morgan.
Yep.
On a contracted service like that, it is a fixed cost when the company bids X number or X dollars per plate, whereas in-house, we don't really have a true cost, do we? Or do we have that nailed down where we can control our costs and know what we're going to be spending exactly to the penny?
So if I understand your question right, I believe that the only contract that's available to you with a food service management company is one that is a fixed dollar per meal. So they're going to say it's $4 for lunch, $2 for a breakfast, $1 for a snack, and then it will really be tied to the number of meals that they are sending out, and which is the number of meals that you're getting reimbursed for. For the in-house program, it's not like that at all. So we can look historically and say, it's last year, and we're going to have to go back to the closest we can come to a normal year since it's been a while. But we will say, we estimate it costs this much for us to put out a lunch or this much to put out a breakfast. But if Dawn, for some reason, is able to save money on labor costs, that savings is going to go right to the program. Or if food costs are going to go up, your program is going to eat that. Whereas with a food service management company, they can, cut their food budget to the bone in order to increase their profits. And then if they end up having to pay a lot more in salaries to staff their kitchens, they're going to eat that difference from what they budgeted.
Okay, and that's kind of where I was going. If like food costs went up 30% in the next 6 months, we as an organization would have to absorb that cost, and the contractor would also have to absorb that cost and not pass anything along to us.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to take you through the budget in much the way you guys saw in your local meetings. And I've got 2 screens up and this gets a little jinky sometimes. So are you guys able to see the big bullseye? Yep, okay. Yep. So I started you with this in your local meetings just to kind of give you an overview of kind of how you're spending money. And this is going to include both the superintendent office and the special education program. And so similar to your local districts, you can see the lion's share at 60% roughly is what you spend on people. Another third is spent on services, and the major categories here are your transportation contract with Terracel. You've got this tuition amount at 10%. That would include both, it's primarily special education tuition, so it would be money that you're paying to send kids out to to other placements out of district. And then purchase services is largely the contracts that we have with NCSS for CAT workers and autism workers for some of Michelle's kids who are still physically in your buildings. And then in the stuff category, which I've renamed due to universal dislike of that term, you'll see that we've got supplies and utilities is about 2%. And then this is where a big chunk of the food service program comes in. So 6% of that is food. And I think if I switch, now you've got a different bullseye on your screen. Yep, okay. So this is that programmatic breakdown similar to what you saw before. So the direct instruction, special education and student support is kind of what we lump in terms of instruction. So that's directly interacting with kids. Administration is the fiscal office here, a very small amount of district-wide expenses, and then superintendent and special ed administration. And then in other, you've got roughly the same size, the food service program as a whole and the transportation contract as a whole. And the food service program goes up from the previous slide because this is now including the salaries and benefits of your staff and things that are other than just the food cost. So any questions on those two slides? Okay. So I included the two budgets separated, and again, similar to what we covered in your local districts, I'm going to concentrate primarily on the change in terms of people. And again, to recap, for folks on a teaching contract, I have budgeted just an increase of 3%. In about 2 more weeks, we'll know who is contemplating a column movement for your teaching staff, and I'll revisit that 3% and decide if I still feel comfortable with that. You do not have a contract with your teachers, so it's going to be guesswork at this point, and you won't be settling with your teachers until after these budgets are warned, unless I'm very surprised at how quickly Rick can hammer us through the finish line on that. In terms of support staff, unionized support staff are locked in, and that is all of Dawn's staff. So they're getting a 75-cent increase. Of course, we don't know yet for support staff who's going to be coming back, and so there may be some changes, and you may, on that side, probably see some savings. Similar with your administrators, there are no contracts settled yet. I've thrown in some dollar amounts there, and we probably will have time to further refine that before you need to warn this budget. I know Lynn likes to get people tied up before this goes to press. So going through this general fund budget, in that direct instruction line, you'll see a drop of 0.25 FTE. This program is your ELL, English Language Learner program, and the staff member you have there is somebody who's dual certified ELL and special ed. And so this percentage moves based on how she is spending her time. This will likely move again before you see a final budget because all of Michelle's special educators are going through a time study right now where they look at their the true amount of how they're spending their time, and then we adjust their percentages based on that. In terms of instructional support, there is no change there. It is half of Jody Valancourt's time, half of Mary Ellis's time, and then 0.2 is Sharon Wright, who's your new teacher mentor. That was a service that up until maybe 3 years ago, we included in CFP, and then that was something that was not allowed to be included under that grant. And she you definitely make good work of her, given the high turnover that we're still seeing with our teaching staff. General administration is the one place in here where we're adding an actual new position. And this is for a position that we're calling a data manager, or a mini Dominic. The lift on him has increased pretty substantially, and so we're proposing to the board that that we add a person to take some of that burden off of him. Lynn, I don't know if you want to jump in, or if Dominic wants to jump in any more on that.
I think that the point right now is that we recognize that there's too much pressure in that one position, not enough help, and we certainly, everybody wants some of Dominic, and we're not sure exactly what the duties would be assigned to that position. It could be some data management. It also could be some tech integration work, so that some of the stuff that needs to happen with the people who are working in schools could be delegated to that person, and could be working with teachers a little more than what Dominic has time for. So we're going to determine what it is, how we would structure that position, but know that it is needed.
And the rest of the people in this line, it's Dominic, Lynn, Jamie, all full-time, Courtney full-time. There's a little piece of Heather, her grant writing fraction is in there, and half of Doreen in our office, who's split between the central office budget and the special ed budget. Line 4 is the position that we added last year and we have not yet been able to hire, and this is for the early ed director, and that's something that both Michelle and I will continue to advocate getting filled. It's just been tough in these strange times to get that done. Line 5, the business line, are the 3 bookkeepers, and then I'm in there as well. So no change to FTE. For plant at this point, I am just including another year of leasing the office space we have now. I know in your board section, probably for the next several meetings, we're going to be discussing that. And so there may be a point at which we want to tweak that amount. The transportation line is the contract with Terracell. You gave me authority at a recent meeting to approach them about rolling that contract over for another year. They are interested in that, and by mid-December, we will be able to figure out what that limit is. It's a number that comes out from the state, which will tell you what sort of cap you have for rolling over that contract. At that point, we'll be able to finalize a contract with them, and that number may drift up or down, hopefully down. The next line is food service. There are some fractional increases to people budget to budget, and that's largely around the number of hours that people have been working. I will be honest, Dawn and I have not really been able to sit down and hammer out a budget for this. So a lot of these numbers are just brought forward from the prior year with some inflation thrown in here and there. Dawn and I should be able to do that before the next meeting, and that will be a more detailed guess than it is now. This is particularly tricky since Dawn has not had a full year of running a normal food service program. I know I mentioned that earlier in the meeting. So there's a lot of speculation on what things will look like come July 1 and what those things will cost. The community services and the interfund transfer, nothing that we need to budget for. There are things that have happened last year. The community services are expenses that we're hoping to be covered by the CRF grant. And there's others of those kind of sprinkled in with that year-to-date column. And again, we should have those grants in hand anytime now, and we'll be able to give you a more concrete update on those at your next meeting. Mary, do you want me to pause for questions there? Or do you want me to do the same run through on special ed?
Why don't you go ahead, Morgan, and do the special ed run through, and then we can circle back if folks have questions.
Sounds good. So this is the special ed budget. This is one where we do tend to make some last minute changes, especially in terms of those high cost kiddos. So those tuition payments to the out of district placements, as well as the contracts that we are going to have with NCSS. This year, I don't know if we're going to see it as much movement because we are making a lot of assumptions on kids who have had pretty heavy services in prior years, but who are now virtual or being homeschooled. And so we don't have as good a handle on what that's going to look like when they're back in our schools, assuming that happens next September. In terms of people, I'm going to kind of speed down, I think, to the very bottom, because I've talked to you before about the state continually updating the chart of accounts, which is this long string of numbers that probably doesn't mean much to anybody other than to me on this call. But we tend to move people around from category to category to try to match what the state is doing. So overall, budget to budget, there is a small increase in this special ed budget. Part of that we talked about a little bit with the ELL teacher, and there's one early ed teacher whose time study has just changed the amount of time we think they're spending on special ed. So that's part of the fractional increase. The rest of the increase are on positions that were not in this budget, but you gave Michelle authority to hire last year. So that was actually in FY20, and we've kept those positions. So one of those was a 0.6 SLP. We had somebody who was working 2 days a week, and when they retired, we backfilled them with a full-time person. And then one was an additional BCBA, which Michelle can talk about if you've got more questions. But those are folks that you had in the buildings before the summer, and we're just allowing the budget to catch up to them.
All right, thanks, Morgan. Any questions, folks, for Morgan on any of that? All right, I think folks are good, Morgan, how that's shaping up.
So we will do some tweaking in the next month, but unless we hear anything from you, we're not going to contemplate any other major changes. Well, unless something major changes, which it does tend to do around here this year. But.
And Morgan, from the state level, have there been any updates on the ed fund and the shortfall and COVID payments and all of that?
Yeah, nothing that I would take to the bank. In theory, on December 1st, we're going to have the yield rate from the tax commissioner, and that's kind of the first big number to drop that drives the local tax rates. In terms of this budget, the big unknowns right now, I think, are the special ed revenues that we're going to get from the state. And we tend to see those in mid-December. Last year, I don't think we saw them before your December meeting. And so I'm going to guess we won't have them before this December meeting. But if you decide to punt any approval of the budget to January, we will likely have them by then.
Okay. Great, thanks, Morgan. And is that it from you, Morgan? You're good?
I think that's it for me.
Okay, great. All right, Lynn, you are up.
So I'm going to start with personnel. I have a couple that I need action on. The first is under hiring. So Enosburg Elementary School has hired Misty McCartney through consolidated federal grants to fill a literacy intervention position. So I'd ask the board to make a motion to hire Misty McCartney.
I'll make the motion.
Great. Polly,
Aye.
Kevin,
Aye.
Rick,
Aye.
Jean Marie,
Aye.
Emily,
Aye.
and Mary. Aye.
Next up is retirement. So you have a longtime special educator who's been in Richford for a great number of years. Pat Brown has decided that he is going to retire at the end of this school year. So would ask for the board to make a motion to accept the resignation of Pat Brown. Patrick Brown.
I'll move.
Okay, Polly,
Aye.
Kevin,
Aye.
Rick,
Aye.
Jean Marie,
Aye.
Emily, she have your mute on? Emily, are you there?
Aye.
Great. And Mary is an aye.
Next up is an update on administrative negotiations. It will be very short. I have not had time to do the administrative negotiations yet, so I hope to have those completed by next board meeting. So there've been a few things simmering in the background recently that have taken just a little bit of the time that I'd hoped to spend on some other things. So stay tuned for December on that one. I do have a personnel that I'm going to bring you to executive for at the end. And then just in terms of another thing under personnel is in terms of the COVID response and what's happening right now. Everybody, kind of sees all of the infection rates increasing throughout the state and in the region as well. So one of the strategies the state is using is surveillance testing, and educators were chosen as a pretty stable population within the state, representative of all corners of our state. So the educator surveillance began on Monday with a group from Chittenden County. I'm hearing tonight that they're starting to get results in from the Chittenden County groups. We tested our staff on Tuesday, so I am anticipating we might start getting results back as early as tomorrow, it's actually a faster turnaround than I was anticipating. So what we know just in terms of the reality around COVID is that staffing, and I've reported this to you before, staffing continues to be the one part of our response that's most fragile. So we're seeing increased absences as people are being identified as close contacts of COVID positive person. And we're also seeing more staff reporting illnesses, and they have to follow the quarantine procedure if they're sick, or they have to go get tested and then wait for their test as well. So we're seeing all of that continue to be a really fragile part of our personnel, our human resource that we have available to keep our schools running in person. So far we're still managing keeping schools open, but it's fragile to say the least. And we're heading into a period of time where more people are going to potentially have to quarantine after the break. We know that we have just found out, I'm going to be communicating later tonight with teachers, that if people go away to go get their college students out of state, they now fall into the must quarantine category. And that's different than it was in the fall when people dropped their students off. And I think that changes result in the increased positives. So we'll have a few other factors that will probably result in more people having to or not being able to report to in-person after the holiday break. So we're working pretty much around the clock on all of that. And I would just say that staffing's at the center right now. The other piece that has gotten a little tricky is we've reported to you in the past about hiring, in that we have a lot of open positions still, and principals have been working really hard to fill those positions. And what we saw back in March as restrictions kind of increased in other areas, there were some additional barriers that got put in front of us, kind of unintended barriers as a result of other closures. So what we saw this week was kind of an unanticipated or an unintended barrier that resulted from the order to work remotely if you can. So we have people in the queue who we have hired and we want to get them working, but they need to do their background checks. So we saw a little roadblock present itself to us this week as people, all those appointments were canceled because the background check places were working remotely. So we have worked through our Franklin County Sheriff's Office, and they're opening it up so that we can get some people tested. And I heard from Swanton PD tonight that they are going to open up some space for us to test people, I think next week. I think that's what I read. So we're trying to find workarounds, but there are some things that make it a little hard. Any questions on anything under personnel? So I want to talk a little bit about teacher negotiations. We're going to be moving into that process in January into February. And what we have done pretty successfully the last couple of negotiation rounds is to identify a chief negotiator and have that chief work with Morgan and I, and then work with a group of that represent the teachers union to establish ground rules in advance of the start of the negotiation process. So one of the things I'd like to ask the board to do is have a conversation tonight and identify who your chief negotiator will be for this round of negotiations.
Who are the negotiators?
I am. I think you are, aren't you, Kevin? Or no?
I don't believe I am.
Morgan, do you have that on your form?
I'm getting there.
Okay, I knew you'd be on it.
So I have Rick and Wendy from the Enosburg Richford side, and Jean Marie and Mary from the NMV side.
Rick, I know historically you have been the chief negotiator. Do you feel as though you'd like to step into that role again, or would you like someone to relieve you of that duty this time round?
Historically, it's an N of 1, so there's that. And then if somebody else has a burning desire to do it, feel free.
Well, we don't. You said it's Wendy from the Richford board.
The ER board, yeah.
Yeah, so she's not here to say one way or the other. Jean Marie, do you have any inclination?
And she's it. There, perfect.
I think that feels really unfair for Wendy. Jean Marie, any interest or time for that?
To continue on like last year, is that where we're at?
To start the next round of teacher negotiations. That was a 1 year. So do you want, are you going to cast your ballot for Rick to be chief negotiator, or is that something you're wanting to take on yourself?
No, I'm 100% throwing Rick under the bus.
Rick, how do you feel about it? I'm happy to do it if you don't have the bandwidth or the time right now, but if you know, I know you did it last year, so you have a sense of kind of what it entails.
Yeah, no, I can do it. That's fine.
Okay, great. So I think we do need a motion on that, correct, Lynn?
Yes.
So I'll make that motion that Rick will be the chief negotiator for the teacher negotiations. Polly?
Aye.
Kevin?
Aye.
Rick?
Aye.
Jean Marie?
Aye.
Emily?
Aye.
And Mary is an aye. Thank you, Rick.
I'm just having a moment here where I'm looking at my agenda and realizing that I put in establishing ground rules, and I was going to bring you into executive to talk about what are some of the wishes for the ground rules. And Morgan, I need a little refresher here. Do we do that with just the 4 on the negotiations council, or was it at the board level? Can you remind me?
I think we've tended to do that with the negotiations council.
Okay, that makes more sense. Didn't jump out at me until I just said that out loud in my head, I guess. So I'll move on to board retreat planning. So I have talked to you about that already, that Mike DeWeese has agreed to help us to do some board work together. And at one of the board meetings that we had last month, or no, earlier this month, I don't remember which one, we talked about a timeline change for that work, because we have board members who are up for election, and we wanted to do that work maybe right after the board election instead of doing it just in advance of. So I've asked Mike if he's available to do it after that, and he has agreed that he could do it. And he said that he would be flexible with whether or not you wanted it to be. I mean, that really is a million years away in March in terms of COVID and response, but he said he'd be willing to do either in person or virtual if it's allowable under the guidance at that time. So I wondered, I have to work with Mike a little bit on outcomes, things that we're hoping to get out of the board retreat. And I was hoping that the board maybe could spend a little time brainstorming, giving me some feedback or some thoughts on what are some of the outcomes you hope to get from working through this retreat.
Mine would be kind of visioning for the board, like what are the things that we keep in mind when we're making decisions, kind of figure that what that mission and vision is.
Lynn, I wonder if I feel as though for me personally, kind of on the spot right now, it's a little, I feel like I need to chew on it a little bit. And I wonder if we might be able to kind of put a pin in it and circle back to it in the December so that, you know, folks can kind of, you know, think on it, meditate on it, and you come back with something, since it's a little ways out and we do have some time. Would that be all right with you?
Absolutely. He's just hoping that I can circle back with him in early January.
Perfect.
To try to talk about what are the wishes. Like, you know, I'm not surprised by Polly's suggestion at all. I think we had talked about that last year, and we talked about doing some goal setting as a board. So maybe you all want to think if there are other things that you want to add in to that process, things you hope to get out of this opportunity.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I think we can task ourselves, all of us, to kind of think on that between now and, you know, December, and have some kind of more kind of a cohesive kind of plan around what would that look like and what each person might be seeking out of it.
Okay. So in terms of the last part of my agenda is around equity literacy. And I had talked with you at the last meeting about doing some professional learning with the SU board around that work. And we have been, as an SU, I'm very excited about where we're heading with this. We've been working with Seed the Way and Dr. Rebecca Haslam and doing some really powerful work with all of our staff members. And we also have a task force who are doing some, they presented to you actually last month, doing some incredible work behind the scenes and with some teacher leaders within each of our schools. I'm also beginning to analyze, equity work through the lens of multi-year planning and thinking of it through the lens of, we've looked at our policy, and then how can we take a strong look at our curriculum and our resources and even our practices in terms of attracting and retaining staff within the SU. So there are a lot of things that we're thinking about in terms of leverage points for equity work across the supervisory union. And I think that, I really think as a board, it's good for you to be right there with us in that learning, so that as we're moving forward, you also can be looking at things through an equity lens. I did ask Dr. Haslam if she'd be willing to do the work with the board, and she is she's in high demand this year. So she is not able to take that work on. So she's going to help hook me up with some other potential leaders in this area. So at this point, I don't have a solid plan for the board development, but I was talking with some of my superintendent colleagues about starting places that they have tried with board members. And one of the ideas that came up is when I was talking with, I believe it was Beth Cobb from Essex Westford, she talked about how the board did a collective book study on equity, and it was something that they agreed to read together and then just carve out a little bit of time at each board meeting to just talk about what it was they were reading and have a little discussion time. So I wondered if that was something that this board might be interested in pursuing.
I like the sound of that, Lynn. I'm certainly interested in pursuing that, and seems like it would be an excellent kind of exercise for all of us as a collective.
I agree.
Are others good?
Yep, I'm good.
So I have a couple of ideas for books to consider. I wonder how should I approach this? Should I work with Mary to choose a topic, to choose a book for us all to dig into? Or is this something that you want me to come up with some options and you guys take a look at the summaries and then maybe weigh in on which one you want to start with?
I'd be okay with Mary deciding, and then just make sure, Mary, you pick a page turner.
Yeah. I'll make sure it is riveting, Rick. Lynn and I will do that.
So Mary, we'll plan some time to talk with one another.
Perfect.
About, and I'm actually going to probably reach out to Dr. Haslam because I do know she has done board work in the past to see if she has any recommendations.
Great. That's great, Lynn. Thanks.
All right, and the only thing I have left are executive session for personnel, and then for actually just personnel.
Okay, great. So let's see. I mean, we have a couple of executive sessions that we need to enter. I wonder, Lynn, do you want to do, I mean, it seems as though we could let folks go. Well, we still have the central office space needs, right? So that's pretty, obviously we want everyone listening in for that. So Lynn, why don't we maybe, you want to do the executive session now?
Well, I'm wondering,
Mary,
move on. Would you mind if we put it, so I want to be mindful of the other leaders that are on the call.
Absolutely.
Maybe we can shift to board business. And I know that you have superintendent evaluation that you'll have to do an executive session.
Yeah.
Maybe just before that, could we do personnel?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Everybody can go after the central office.
Yeah, that's great. Cause I'm certainly mindful of it's almost 8:30. Or it is 8:30. So why don't we prioritize the central office space needs discussion right now? and then we can let everyone get to bed while we continue with the executive sessions and such. So I was feeling like it may be helpful if folks wanted to hear a little bit about how the conversation went with the Enosburg Select Board that Rick and we attended that meeting virtually week before last, and kind of just got the update on the armory space. So it's, that seems relevant to the discussion. So I could start with that if folks feel like that would be helpful. Okay, I shall start with that. So really well, I learned a couple of things. One, my sense, and Polly, it'd be helpful from the select board side of things. I know you kind of wear multiple hats here. If anything I'm saying isn't kind of aligning with where the Enosburg Select Board stands, don't hesitate to kind of correct me. It was about 2 weeks ago. It might as, sometimes these things feel like they were 2 months ago with how things move these days. So we really were just putting out the feelers, and Morgan had done an excellent job kind of giving us a summary of the space needs and some of the kind of guiding parameters that are important to the conversation, from, square footage to parking spaces, to ADA accessibility, to centrality within our 6 towns. So, that was kind of, we shared with the Enosburg Select Board that list, and kind of outlined some of the challenges that we are facing as an organization in the current space, which is limited in a lot of those kind of areas. So one thing that was interesting is that at the very end of the meeting, Felicia LaFleur, who's the legislative rep down in Montpelier, she said that now the town of Enosburg will actually be able to charge rent for that space, because when we initiated the conversation, we are recognizing that space is so far from move-in ready. I mean, it really can't be further from move-in ready as far as accommodating that level of kind of office infrastructure and such. And so, that begs questions of, if the SU were to invest in these kind of major renovations, then what does a long-term lease look like that honors that kind of financial input in lieu of rent? But then at the very end of the meeting, that it was kind of news, it was news to me at least, that has now kind of shifted a bit, the arrangement that the state is going to have with the town of Enosburg around that space. And my sense coming away from the meeting, and really we just kind of were putting out feelers and leaving it at that. They have a lot to discuss within the town around their needs for the space, other organizations that may also want to be in there. So I don't have a strong sense of a timeline from the Enosburg Select Board yet as to kind of when they might like to circle back and have another conversation with us about that. And, as I've kind of meditated on it since the meeting, I feel as though what makes sense to me at this juncture is potentially enrolling someone who has a better sense of the real estate in the area, that may be able to help kind of look at other options for us that if we are able to really set kind of a clear kind of priorities around the needs that we may be able to, it might be beneficial for us to enlist a professional to help kind of look at what is available and what's out there, because, you know, something like the Armory, it is excellent in the fact that it addresses this centrality issue, but it needs so much work. And so, you know, wouldn't it be great if we can find something that is more move-in ready, and also addresses centrality? You know, I think we're going to need to be mindful that we don't want to let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And it may be hard to find something that checks all the boxes. But if we can kind of have a broader kind of look at it and really get clear about those priorities and those parameters around the space, I think it would be, I think that's where I kind of landed after the discussion with the Enosburg Select Boards.
So the rent issue, that was news to the select board as well. Apparently Felicia kept that under her hat for quite some time, that apparently it was passed that the town could charge rent if they so choose. However, it is stipulated that that space can only be used for municipal use. It can't be used for any outside or private companies or what have you. It can only be municipal. And you're right, when the select board basically was kind of wowed by Morgan's work as around square footage and the needs assessment, basically, and the select board had decided that it was their turn to do that kind of assessment, to figure out what are the needs of square footage, you know, as far as like community space we may need. So that was the next step, was that they were going to kind of crunch the numbers and do that as well.
And Rick, I don't know if you have anything to add, since you know, were with us in the meeting. I'm not sure if I remembered kind of everything of relevance.
Yeah, so I'd summarize it as non-committal. You know, I don't think they really have thought a lot about what they actually need in the building and what they want to use the building for. And I think the thought of putting another floor in there was something that nobody had really thought of. So I think they need time to kind of ruminate on stuff.
And I think that my concern around the Armory, and I think is I'd like to get a sense of urgency, because I think that helps drive the kind of you know, the part around the Armory, because even if the town of Enosburg came and said, yes, you know, we're interested in continuing the conversation, we would be still quite a ways out from being able to utilize the space, because of the amount of renovation that would need to take place. And so, which may be okay, but it may not be okay, because it does seem as though, Lynn, you're bursting at the seams, and we have multiple new hires and no place to put them. And even without COVID in the scenario, there's still space limitation issues. The parking issues remain. The lack of ADA accessibility remains, and then there's the component of centrality, and whether it is in a location that is easy for all of our communities to access, and all of our staff that travel from, you know, quite a distance.
Holly, I have a question for you wearing your other hat, and I just want to make sure that the select board is tuned into the requirement that the JROTC program has access to a usable space in there.
Yeah, the select board is aware that the JROTC does need to use that space as well.
Okay, so I've done a walkthrough there with them and have an idea of kind of what they need, and that's not a big ask for them. It's not like they need that whole drill room or anything.
See, that's what the select board, I think, at this point needs to do. You know, we've been so hung up with like phase one engineering around asbestos and you know, oil spills and all of that, that we haven't really had the time to do the actual space assessment. So you probably know more than we do as far as what the JRTC needs. We just knew that they had to have access. And so that's the kind of work that needs to happen.
Okay. Yeah, and I'm happy to come in and discuss that, and Lieutenant Colonel would as well. I just don't want that to get lost.
Yeah, no, that's definitely on our radar. And actually, we've allowed them to store all their stuff currently. So they're, yeah, still using that space even now. Yeah.
Okay.
And Polly,
then,
oh, sorry, go ahead, Morgan.
well, I was going to change the subject a little bit, so I'll let you go first.
Oh, yeah, so I had another question for Polly with her select board hat on. Polly, do you all have a sense, like, are you setting a kind of timeline for your process, the town's process in making decisions around the use of space?
Yeah, we have just brought the maps, the blueprints to get them printed in a large fashion to just kind of sit down and kind of map out what our needs are as far as square footage. So that's the next step, just to see. And then, of course, we have to speak to, you know, for instance, our rec director. We need to talk to her about what her potential space needs she'll have. So yeah, it's kind of fact finding right now, but it is in the process for the next meeting to at least look at the maps.
Great. Okay.
So there are two other facilities kind of in play, and I don't know anymore which board we've talked to about them. So the Enosburg-Richford board asked Lynn and I to look at People's Plaza, and I can't remember if we gave the SU board that update or not.
I do not think you did.
Okay. For those of you who don't know what the People's Plaza building is, across the road from Richford Elementary School. It's a big one-story building. I think it's 10,000 square feet. Is that right, Lynn?
Yeah.
And it's currently for sale. It's listed, I think, for $625,000. And Kevin can hop in and correct me if that number's wrong.
That's correct.
Okay. And so the Enosburg-Richford board wanted us to look into that, and because it's a sale, it would have to be owned by a school district because the SU can't own property. So it would be the Enosburg-Richford board deciding to buy it and then renting that to the SU. It checks some of the boxes, but not all of them. Obviously, it doesn't really help the centrality piece. It would be a much easier build out than the Armory, and it has a lot more space. Parking would be basically the same, not an issue. I think the challenge would be there's the cost of buying the building, which the ERU board would want to get back at some point on top of the build out cost. And then there are some current renters in there as well. So it's got, like any decision you make on this, it's got a political angle as well. I don't know, Lynn, if you want to add anything to that.
No, I think that Mary, you started talking about priorities, and I think that's kind of exactly where the conversation has to land, is around what are all those boxes that you're talking about checking. And I think that there are some boxes that People's Plaza checks that the Armory does not, and there are some boxes that the Armory checks that People's Plaza does not. So I feel like one of the things that around People's Plaza is that Morgan's pretty right that a lot of those spaces would be pretty ready to go. It is a space there's ample space, and it would certainly give us some room to grow there. So I think deciding what are those priorities and how are you going to go around making decisions about all of the potential available spaces that you might have to consider.
I'm familiar with the People's Plaza, and I can see how, you know, in some ways it really is a lot more, you know, turnkey and spacious and ADA accessible and parking, but it's certainly not much more central to some of the communities. You know, I'm thinking of Sheldon and even, you know, Bakersfield in particular. But, and then I don't know about the complexities. I can't speak to the complexities of the Enosburg-Richford School Board buying that and what that would look like, getting, you know, finding the funds to be able to do that. I don't know how challenging or not that would be for that school board to come up with that money, but it's certainly worth kind of keeping it in the picture, I think. But I also am wondering what else is out there. I mean, I'm hard pressed to believe that this is it. I don't have a finger on the pulse of the real estate market in Franklin County, and more specifically in Enosburg. I do keep coming back to Enosburg a little bit just because that centrality issue feels important, but I guess it would be also helpful to hear from others. How are you kind of organizing in the level of importance of these, of all of these, or do they all feel equally important? Do we need to hold out for something that checks all the boxes, or can we compromise in certain arenas? And so that's why I was thinking, well, it might be helpful to just have a conversation with someone who better understands the real estate market in the area.
Do you have like a document you could send out that lets us know what it is that you're looking for?
I could certainly share what I gave you and Rick, Mary.
Yeah, that's an excellent overview.
Yeah.
I mean, you did a good job kind of breaking down, you know, what that ideal configuration would look like for office space square footage and bathrooms and conference spaces, parking spaces, you know, and then some of the things that weren't necessarily on that list, Morgan, are these kind of, I mean, maybe they're more like, you know, they're equally important, but not as concrete, you know, the ADA piece and that centrality piece.
Right. Yep, I can do that. The other thing that I'd like to add to the conversation is that the chair of the Richford Select Board reached out to me, and we had a conversation. It was probably a few weeks ago now, and it was after word got out that we were looking at the Armory, and basically had a conversation around what would it take to make this current space work better for us. And that his feeling, you know, as an individual, and he couldn't speak for the board, but his feeling was that it would be worth the town to invest money in making this place more useful if it kept us here for a longer period of time, because we do have a fair amount of square footage here, and the Richford, you know, rental market isn't likely to backfill that right away if we were to leave. It is a challenge.
Like to keep you in your existing office space right now?
Right, right. So it is a challenge unless they're going to kick the post office out. There's not a lot of space on the main floor here. They do have a you know, pretty expansive basement, basically below the entire footprint of the building, which is underused. We have one room of that right now, which we use for storing things that we don't care about if it gets damaged, because it's, you know, it's a basement level and it's got some moisture issues there. So it would be, would either require a lot of work or a lot of arm twisting, or both, to have people in there in office space. But I did want to tell you that they are reaching out and certainly are interested in doing what they can to keep us in town.
I definitely appreciate that they are reaching out, but I do not think that that is probably an appropriate place to put employees is in the bomb shelter.
And I really have some concerns about the two big things that bother me are the ADA issues. I mean, that's a pretty significant issue as far as I'm concerned, and the parking, even, and the safety of our employees accessing that parking when it's dark, and it's dark all the time now. So, and I appreciate the effort, but like, unless you're gonna put a third floor on that building, I don't know, unless they were thinking of, is there some other existing space that the town owns that they wanted to move you into? You know, and I know Mary said this a few times, and I think that she, as someone from Montgomery, and me as someone from Bakersfield, do think about the way that our parents, our students and parents can access the services and the staff that are in the central office when you're in Richford. You know, if you are a single mom with a special needs kid and you live in Sheldon and you don't have a vehicle, or you have a very limited access to transportation, that, you know, that's difficult. So that's pretty high on the list too. So if we had the option to be able to move you into a more central location, there's value in that. But I think, now I think it was Lynn that said, you know, I think we maybe do need to itemize what our wants and needs are, and be able to try to prioritize them as we look at some different spaces.
So I brought this up once before and it went over like a lead balloon, but I'm going to bring it up again. Is it possible to divide your employees? So you have your employees that are it's most important to be centrally located, move those to Enosburg, and have the ones that are not so important to stay in their current location?
You might want to figure out a different way to spin that.
It's late, I'm sorry. But the ones that are less important to centralization, I guess, as being important for their job duties. You know, obviously Dawn is going to get the corner office in the upper floor with her $340,000 grant. Dominic is going to be in the bomb shelter, but
Oh, Rick. I mean, I think, Rick, that what I heard from Lynn was that there's a really kind of important cohesion of having everyone in the same space. So I certainly see what you're saying. I mean, I think from a function perspective, yes, you could you theoretically, you know, maybe you could have two separate offices, but then we also have to think, like, with that, I mean, it's like, you know, with that comes 2 electric bills, two Wi-Fi bill, 2 DSL bills, 2 heating bills, 2 plowing bills, you know, if then, you know, we're having multiple spaces. So I just wonder, it feels cumbersome financially, you know, kind of onerous to split things in that way. And then there's just the kind of just that human kind of cohesiveness of an organization, because they are like one organism, you know, with a pretty important ecosystem under one roof. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I land. I don't relish the idea of kind of that fracturing of the workspace.
well, I guess I don't either, but if we're prioritizing, right, space is key, right? I mean, that's why we're having this discussion, really, is because we're run out of space. So if we can do something for a little while until we address maybe some of the other issues, I didn't know, maybe it would be a kind of an interim solution, you know. And we also have a building in Enosburg that we already own that's not really doing anything, that you know, could be renovated some, you know, so it would solve a lot of temporary, or it was, well, maybe not a lot of long-term problems, but it certainly solve some of the space problems in the short term for not a lot of money. You know, I mean, we're looking at, no matter what you do, somehow it's going to be $1 million or more if we move into the Armory, or if we, you know, purchase the building in Richford. That's a lot of internet service.
So, I mean, I hear totally what you're saying. And I think that we, you know, it may come to that, but maybe perhaps before we get to that point of needing to kind of split things, maybe I just wanted to circle back and see whether the board would support, you know, be supportive of, you know, Lynn and myself reaching out to a local realtor to just make sure we're kind of casting a wide enough net and have, I mean, it's hard to make a decision when we're like, we've considered 2 other spaces plus the one that we're in. And I'm not keen on that bomb shelter idea either. I think that would be a very hard renovation and space to make safe from a mold, mildew perspective, moisture perspective. I'm putting my, you know, construction builder's cap on in that regard. And I'm not keen on that. But yeah, so I just feel like we don't quite have enough sense of options yet. It might be nice to see if there are other options that we're not even thinking of.
Sure. I mean, it does no harm, right? It does no harm to ask.
Yeah, it's just a fact finding mission.
Yeah, I would support that too. I would check.
And then we can report back in December, and hopefully by then we'll have, you know, a clearer sense. And at the same time, it'll help, you know, we can get, you know, clearer on those priorities and, you know, what needs to really be driving the decision-making around the space.
I just wanted to, I agree completely. I think bringing a realtor in is a really great idea because you, at this point, don't even really know what all of your choices are potentially. So it's hard to make a decision not knowing what maybe some of the other options are out there. But back to what Rick said, I mean, he has a valid point in, I would guess that Morgan maybe underestimated the amount of space you folks need just basing it off your current space. But in the world that I'm living in right now, we have some employees, a number of employees who have said, actually, I don't even need an office. I could totally do my job from home. So I don't know if there are people on your team that have had that thought yet. Or that, I mean, that your team is not giant. So even if you had like 2 people who said, oh, I'm fine from home, I don't know that that has much of an impact on the square footage that you're looking for.
Well, and we've certainly shown that in the short term we can do that because we've been going through these different versions of not being able to be in person. We haven't really had a conversation about whether that's a viable long-term option.
I think that I try to be quiet there, Rick. Did you notice that? It was hard for me.
I know it was. I could tell.
Because I was your lead balloon last time. Just in terms of culture, it's very hard to imagine a long-term solution. And I recognize tonight you said the short-term part, which I think would be a little easier to swallow than a long-term solution. I don't want to divide up our team. I think some of the benefit of us being together is although we've added people because we've centralized functions, we're pretty efficient, and there are people that wear a lot of hats, which means that they end up having to work with a lot of different people, right? So Doreen, for example, needs ready access to Michelle and ready access to me and ready access to Morgan, ready access to Jamie because of some of the different functions that are assigned to her. So although it might seem that it would be kind of a clean split between business and between the educational leadership portion, of our team, even having that upstairs downstairs divide, that was one of the things when I arrived and began as superintendent that became evident pretty clearly, is that physical barrier between, that staircase actually provided a cultural barrier as well. So we've been kind of battling that to try to be more unified, because we do our best work when we can be together and all pulling in the same direction. So I look at that as if we had to go short-term, Rick, like in, what Jean Marie said, we have proven that some people can be very effective working from home. But long-term, my wish would be that we could all be together, because it's best for the organization.
So, Lynn, you know how I feel about it. As a Richford resident, I don't know what it would do to the community if this office, the term I used at our board meeting, was closed. I know it's not closing, it would be moving into a different community. But the shock, I think, that it would generate in this community and the reaction, I don't know how people would react in town and what they would think next. So that's why I really spent some time after our last SU meeting. I was thinking about it a lot, and then I realized that the People's Plaza building was available. I found some information, I sent it to Morgan. I think that's a really viable option. I know it's not centrally located, but for an extra 10 minutes in a car, how often are people, parents or whomever, driving to Richford? I drive a long ways every day for work. That's my choice. But it's, an extra 10 minutes in a car is not that big a deal to me. But the hole that this would leave in our community, I think, is a bigger deal. So I really think we need to really analyze this and make the right choice for all of our communities. But the loss of what this could have for Richford would be, I think it could be devastating.
Kevin, you mean more than just the financial impact, I'm assuming.
Yeah, it could be, this office has been in Richford for as long as I can remember. I'm in my 40s, and I always remember it was in the old Spears Funeral Home building when I was going into school. And then I don't know when it moved to where it is today, but yeah. And I just think the culture, not the culture, but the, through the whole Act 46 process, the thought process people were saying was, oh, Richford's going to become the middle school. Richford High School will become the middle school, or this or that. And again, back to the term closing. If you close this space in Richford, what are people in Richford going to say? Okay, what's next? When will our school close? If we're going to move this office space to Enosburg, when is our school going to close? That's my fear.
I think that's definitely a valid fear, but if anybody were to walk through the space that they currently live in, they would see in a second how it really does not fit their need. Now, I'm not saying I think People's Plaza is a great option, but the one that they're in, I think if anybody were to see it.
And I don't disagree with that at all, Polly. I've been in there many a times where you're run upstairs, run downstairs, and you're back and forth. But I think the People's Plaza option is a good option. I think we need to kick the tires a little bit more on it.
I think, I agree with you, Kevin, that it is a viable option. And I think that I haven't heard anybody say not to take a good look at that property, because I think it definitely has a lot of positives. I get a little concerned when I hear this being kind of equated to a school closing, because we're not downsizing. It's the opposite. And this is what I had expressed in the Enosburg-Richford meeting, is that this isn't about closing an office space, and where the services have grown, like we're developing programs and we need more space to continue to be able to do what it is that we're doing. So even if it lands in Richford, great, we land there, but I just wouldn't want it to be compared to closing a school, because I don't see the equivalency is kind of a false equivalency in my mind. And I know you're kind of getting at the sentiment of what it might feel like, but I just wouldn't want anybody to watch this and say, you know, stuff's closing down, because that's not what this discussion is all about.
No, I agree. I understand that. I'm just fearing what some people might think, I guess.
The other thing is, I think that maybe a couple people should go talk to the town of Richford and just get their input a little bit, both on renovating the current building some, and also their thoughts on, you know, whether they would want some, you know, whether they want that People's Plaza to be office space or whether they want it to be businesses, you know.
Because of the tax impact, Rick? Is that what you
Well, the
mean?
tax impact, plus I don't know what, I mean, I don't know where else in Richford they have that kind of a structure to move businesses into if they have an opportunity. You know, I don't know if those are concerns or not.
I mean,
I think it would be a good idea to have a discussion with the Richford Select Board, though.
And I did talk with the board chair about this space again. I didn't talk to him about People's Plaza. I would guess presumably if you move there, the people who are renting People's Plaza might be looking for a space. But I don't know a lot about the needs of the folks who are there.
And the People's Plaza space would be a purchase, right? Is that what you said earlier? It's not something, it's not rental, it's a purchase.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think just no matter where we land, that has to be one of the discussion points. Like, can we, is it the right time for us to invest in a piece of property purchase or versus renting, you know, no matter, just some time to sort of roll around in that. I don't know the details there.
And the thing with that is that it would be the Enosburg Richford board that would have to purchase it because we're not allowed to. So they would be going to their voters in their town, asking to buy that building with, you know, probably a promise that we would rent it back from them for X years at X number of dollars.
Or better yet, the NMV board can buy it.
Well, so I heard a couple things. So I just want to make sure that I'm, you know, kind of honoring what everyone's kind of asks are here. And Kevin, I can't see your face, but I certainly hear the emotion kind of that you're holding around it. You know, I hear it in your voice, and I really want to just acknowledge that, and I can completely appreciate why people in the Richford community would feel really disheartened, or some would feel disheartened to see the central office leave the town. And so I think we should absolutely kind of bear that in mind, and you know, as we move forward. And I too think that there's certainly worth looking at the People's Plaza. And I also feel as though it's important that we have a central office that meets the needs of all the towns. And that's the kind of, that's a little bit of the disconnect and the challenge here is, and that lack of centrality I'm really aware of for members coming from our farther towns, and it's a little bit hard to square that. So I just think we're going to have to kind of weigh all these out as a board and try to get as much information as we can and make the very best decision that we can ultimately, you know, for our staff and for our communities. So that said, the couple things that I'm seeing that we may want to do is, Rick, I think you mentioned having a conversation with the Richford Select Board. So, you know, we could certainly do that the same way that we did with the Enosburg Select Board. And then It sounds as though people are supportive of Lynn and Morgan and I kind of connecting with a local realtor to just see what else might be out there. We may have no other options, and that's really helpful to know, or we may have a number of other good options that, you know, bear discussion too.
Can I just clarify for my designee notes, who is making contact with the select board?
Well, we hadn't decided that. I mean, I know Rick and I did the last time, but maybe in this sense, you know, maybe Kevin, since that's his, you know, this is your community. I don't know if you'd like to be a part of that. I'm certainly happy to as well. I'm
fine with
totally open.
Yeah, I can do that. I don't know exactly when their next meeting is, but I can reach out to the chair and be in touch with them.
Okay, that sounds good. So Kevin will do that, Lynn. Kevin, do you want me to join as well, or would you like to just kind of do that and then report back to the board in December?
I can report back if you're okay with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kevin, can you ask, when he spoke with Morgan, he had talked about the space inside, and he had also talked about trying to find a creative solution to the parking thing. We had, you know, we brought up the parking to them a couple years ago, and they're trying to figure out if there's a solution to that part of the dilemma as well, because that is a sticky wicket, especially in the winter.
Okay, so office space, so square footage and parking spaces.
Right.
And then also don't forget to ask them about how their feelings about using the People's Plaza.
Correct.
And I have a quick question, just kind of on the People's Plaza piece. So for the Enosburg Richford board folks, would you want like a 100% commitment on the part of the SU to relocate the central office there before you, I mean, the only reason you would purchase that building would be for this expressed kind of move, correct?
Yeah, 110%.
Just making sure I'm understanding the dynamic, the kind of, you know, it's a little like chicken or egg kind of thing. Okay. So Kevin, you'll circle back with us in December, and then Lynn and Morgan and I will also do due diligence with a realtor and some fact finding, and we can all kind of share, you know, what we've learned in December. And then Morgan, it may be helpful if you want to email out that great kind of summary you did for Rick and I in advance of the Enosburg meeting. And that'd be good for Kevin, I think, to have specifically, you know, when he is talking to the Richford Select Board too.
Will do.
Okay, great. Any other discussion on that, folks? Okay, great. So it seems like at this point we can let everyone go to bed or have some downtime and move into Lynn's executive session for personnel, and then the board can do their executive session for the evaluation.
Have a great night, everybody.
And thanks to everyone. I really appreciate all the amazing work.
I move to go into executive.
Okay, Emily?
Aye.
Jean Marie?
Aye.
Rick?
Aye.
Kevin?
Aye.
Polly?
Aye.
And Mary is an aye.
And you are out of executive?
Okay. So, and now we are going to re-enter an executive session, correct, Morgan?
Correct, for personnel.
There were no motions pending from
that last executive? Okay, so I'll make that motion to enter executive for superintendent evaluations. Emily?
Aye.
Jean Marie?
Aye.
Rick?
Aye.
Kevin?
Aye.
And Polly?
Aye.
Mary is an aye.
And you are in executive session, and you are out of executive.
Okay, great. So we have no action coming out of, oh, well, no, that's not true. We've warned a special meeting for December the 9th at 6:30. That's our action coming out of the executive session. And now I will take, and I think we are pretty clear on next steps around central office for the upcoming agenda. And I think I just need a motion to adjourn.
I'll move, but Morgan, was it recording when we were in executive that second time?
No, it wasn't.
Okay, I'll move.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Right, everyone. Take good care. Stay healthy.